Welcome back to Starting with IEP, episode 30. I'm your host, Flor D'Amelia. And if you're just joining us, pause this episode and go back to episode 29 first, because this is a continuation of that previous episode to get that full context. For today's episode, we're continuing the conversation with Michael, and we're getting into the real decisions that impact your child's IEP, ESY, one-to-one support, and what the schools are actually thinking behind the scenes. I want you to listen to this episode with intention. So here are 3 things. Go ahead and grab something to take notes. Think about your child and think about your next IEP meeting, because this is where understanding turns into advocacy. Before we jump in, if this podcast has helped you in any way, please follow and subscribe, share this episode with another parent, and leave a comment. Let me know what stood out to you today. And if you're ready to stop guessing in IEP meetings and actually feel confident walking in, go to startingwithiep.com. We have courses, workbooks, and tools designed to guide you step by step. And if you have a story, not just any story, but something that could help another parent feel less alone, please share. You can now share your story directly on our website, because behind every IEP, there's a story that deserves to be heard. So, all right, let's continue the conversation from episode 29. Well, we're going to be shifting towards ESY, one-to-one support, and high-cost services for our next series of questions. So the first one on that topic is, how should teams properly determine eligibility for ESY services?
It's always data. It's just not based on regression, but is there a likelihood of skill loss? Okay. And the time needed to recoup those skills. It's based obviously on the individual, what they need, the severity of the disability. Are there opportunities? Are there emerging skills, breakthrough opportunities, behaviors that could interfere? All kinds of different things. But again, ESY is not a fait accompli. You just don't get it. There has to be certain things that line up that are appropriate for the student to attend ESY. Then there's some schools that are 11th month programs that just basically have that ESY built in already. So you just keep moving instead of having an ESY meeting. Some schools don't have ESY meetings because they're not an ESY based school, okay, because they're 11 months. But 10-month programs, you look at all those things to see if it's in the best interest of the student and will help them. If it's not going to help them, and the data is showing that even with more intense instruction, this is not going to happen, then that may not be appropriate for the student. And then you have to take into consideration, is it a residential program? Okay. Because if it's a residential program, that means that it's another month they have to stay residentially, which provide other services and different things like that. So it depends on the age of the child. You may have a 16-year-old who now is in an IEP meeting who's vocal and, wait a minute, I don't want to attend ESY. So now you have the student who can articulate they don't want to attend ESY, even though they should, but then you run the risk of having a teenager who is really adamant about not being there. And what are you going to gain from that? You're going to have an argumentative teenager who just doesn't want to be there. They want to hang out with their friends versus be in a summer program. So there's a lot of things that go into that, but it's just not something that's automatic. You have to look at all the data. And if there's a likelihood of skill loss, then that's more than likely a motivation to have ESY.
Yes. When you were saying about skill loss, but also when you were talking about age, they offer that to Aaliyah. We already had the experience of what ESY looked like for Aaliyah. And honestly, that it was a waste of time. So I was looking for other summer school programs. Mm-hmm. And then there is this program, JCC, and it has an inclusion factor because I wanted more inclusion opportunities for Aaliyah, for her to be in the gen ed. And they would just say that would be difficult for her. At that time, Aaliyah didn't have a one-to-one. So I had to decide between ESY and JCC with their inclusion program. I went with the JCC inclusion program. At that time, there was a scholarship that was given to families for their child to go to summer camps or inclusion summer camps. So I was so grateful for that opportunity. It's just that I know that a lot of families, sometimes they want that ESY and then they have that experience and then it was a negative experience, but it has to do with what are you looking for your child to gain at that time? I know for that summer, my focus was, this is the only opportunity we're going to have an inclusion part for where my daughter's going to have access to typical developing peers, where she can be around those peers and gain more social skills. So that was important for me.
But that's a great conversation to have. So what are the upsides and downsides of this, family? What do you want to see happen? What's the end goal here? If they talk to you, You articulated what you wanted. Probably ESY was not the appropriate thing because that's not what they're going to get there. But you could do without that intense instruction because you're getting even more benefit from your daughter being included in a group setting with typical peers, doing some fun stuff, which will help her socially and emotionally as she moves forward. So that was the better way to go. Okay. But again, that's a conversation that the team should have. What do you want? What's in the best interest of the kid? We don't provide the service. Then, if it's a teenager, your transition person should have, well, there's a summer camp at the JCCs that may be really good for kids with autism. There's a Y program, okay? There's a this, there's a that. That's when the school should be that true partnership to help you find you're unique, you're in the field. All these different things are happening. Most parents are not, okay? So if you give them and say, hey, look at all these things that you have access to. Why don't you try it out instead of doing ESY? It may be more beneficial at this point. Then that's a great decision to make.
I'm wondering if I can intro also JCC's inclusion program for their camps, because I've been telling families and I don't think they've known that, and that they get a one-to-one counselor. Sometimes people are like, oh, one-to-one counselor, that means an additional cost. No, it's the same cost as all of the other, which
Mm-hmm.
is great.
It's a weird example, but you go in and you go to get your car serviced and you come on to get a windshield wiper replaced. More than likely, what they do, besides doing the windshield wiper, they go through a whole list of things and check your car out. They check the tires. They'll check all these different things. They'll give you a whole list. We check this, 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 and this. You may need to get your oil changed this time. You may need to get this. It's the same thing here. Okay. You can go down and you may be talking about one thing in the IEP meeting, but you can give them a list of things for parents to think about and say, well, maybe if while you're thinking, you should look at this because this could provide this or this could provide that. That's where that partnership comes in. It's an extra step for the school. But again, if you're building your school and your program the right way, and it's person-centered, it's parent-supported, then the people you have in place in a transition role, which I know is really dear to your heart, and how kids are transitioning with skills and things like that, and ESY and summer programs and all that fun stuff, then you should have a menu of stuff ready to give to a parent to help support them. But just to say, oh, we don't know, that's not a partner. That's a one-sided relationship. It does take some effort to build those extra amenities, but they're easy to do if you're doing it on a daily basis. Just find the programs in the area and give them to the parents and say, here, maybe look into these programs. They could help your child. You know what I mean?
Yes.
It's easy.
Options for parents, they're great feeling that. Can you also let us know what are other misconceptions that school holds about ESY that families should understand?
It's going to change the disability in some way. If you go through ESY automatically at the end of it, the child's going to get all the skills that no, that's more than likely not going to be the case. It's not a be all end all solution to get the student from point A to point B. It's there to help support the student so they don't regress and they're not losing skills. Okay. Yes. But it's not something that they're going to come out the back end of it and all of a sudden the disability is going to go away. And their skills could change a little bit, sure, but it's a really short period of time and that's not going to happen. So that's the biggest misconception, that you're going to come out the back end and things are going to be totally different. It's going to be like apples and giraffes. That's not the case.
Yeah, I remember in an IEP meeting when I was a middle school teacher, one of the teachers were saying to describe it, and also the interpreter put in her piece was saying what you were saying. There was like, well, it's like summer school to help them catch up, but not to prevent regression, but they were selling it to the parents because the family wanted to go onto a family trip, but they were making it sound like this ESY, the child already has a huge gap and they were going to close it with this one. And in my head, I'm like, oh my goodness, no, we can't promise that to the parent. We cannot promise that because first, we don't know who the ESY teacher is. Most of the time, they don't know who the teacher is going to be. Hopefully, it's a great teacher, but it may not be, and it may be a negative experience for the child, depending on who that teacher is. So it was just how you said it. I think that's why a lot of parents, it just depends who is explaining what ESY is or can be for the child. But the reason why I was feeling so sad for that family is because it was really the only time that they were going to bond as a family, because during the other days, the dad works. The mom also is working. So it was the summer. They felt that they needed to do this for their child, but then they took away the whole family part of it, which I was so sad for.
Well, that goes back to knowing your families. If that's the case, then you take ESY off the table right away and say, listen, the family trip is a lot more important. What the student could benefit from that experience socially and emotionally with the family that they typically don't get throughout the year will be more impactful than spending X amount of weeks in a school. Go on your family trip. We'll see you in September. Yay. That's how that should be. But you got to know your families.
Yeah.
Okay. And if you don't know the families, then you're going to come up with the wrong thing. But if you already know ahead of time, and I've been talking to you, and I know what's important to you and what's in the best interest of the kid, then I would have that discussion way before that. Then when you get into ESY, we're not doing it because of this. Everyone's agreed. Boom, done. Okay.
Yeah.
But taking that experience away, that's not a good reason. I would argue that the child could get more out of that experience than spending time in class doing goals and objectives.
Yeah, I remember the mom saying she was just nervous about that because of the resentment now that the sibling is going to have towards, because this was like a new IEP for the middle school
Sure.
students, and they were going to focus, if I remember, more on math. One of the things that she was asking was like, I can teach the math, like middle school is
You're
not
right.
that hard to teach. So
You're
the
right.
mom, but the school was really pushing on ESY. Do you know if
Well,
there's a reason why? Because typically I see schools not wanting to push ESY, but do you know why some schools do want to push the attendance for ESY for a number of students?
okay.
No, I
Well,
was just wondering. Sorry.
from a school perspective, you get paid for it. So your bottom line is affected if you're not providing the service. So you only get paid for what your services you're providing. So the school's getting paid for that. Again, it goes back to what's best for the kid.
Yeah.
If it's not good for the kid, then don't do it. But if the reason was they can get more in math instruction in class, well, if you're going on a trip, math can be in a lot of different forms. Distance, you've traveled how far? There's math. You have how many activities you want to do in a day? There's math. How many steps are we walking each day? There's math. You can build math and language into a lot of common day scenarios and still get some results from it. You got to trust parents that to know what's best for their kids. And again, content can be built into everyday situations. 5-step directions. There's math. That's a recipe. You're making cupcakes on vacation. There's math right there. So you got to give parents the ability to know who their kid is, know them, and what's going to be best for them. All right. Not what's best for your bottom line. The bottom line is important for, okay, when you have a school, you're responsible to run it in the best business way possible. Okay.
I know in order for the school to keep running.
Without revenue, you can't have programs. Without
Yeah,
programs, you're not going to have revenue. So when you have a school, that's how you have to think. But if you focus on one versus the other all the time, you're
they
going to have a
can.
lopsided program. If it's, oh, we can make money, but the programming is here, it has to be like this.
Well, thank you for that insight. It's so nice to hear. I'm telling you, the first time that I spoke to you, I was like, oh my goodness, it's just so nice. Because sometimes parents feel like they have to do something for their child. For example, actually, I don't know if I told you this. I know I tell you a lot of things, but I don't think I told you this. My whole family, we had to stop going to mass because someone in the beginning earlier on just told us that we couldn't. We couldn't because of Aaliyah's vocal and motor stereotypy was just so disruptive during service. So then we stopped going. And then my son was the one that, okay, we're going to try this, go put her back in the community. And she's doing great. But a lot of the times families cannot do things. Back then, I didn't know about when you go to attraction sites, they give you a pass for you to go in and you don't, it's not skipping the line, you still wait
Sure.
with everyone else. But I didn't know that. But then we would tell our kids, like, no, we can't go because Aaliyah doesn't do well waiting in lines, especially if it was hot outside. I was afraid of her and her seizures being induced. So a lot of the times families feel that they have to pick one or the other. So it's just
Mm-hmm.
nice to know that there are individuals that do understand that we can't
Sure.
pick our family time. It is okay versus just so worrying so much about another thing, or there's just ways to balance things.
Absolutely. I'll give you an example, and it ties into it. I had a student who was referred to the school who was a young kid who, in their IEP, showed that they were getting restrained up to 12 times a day. This is a little kid. We're talking up to my waist little kid. And I'm like, what would you have to restrain a kid who can't even come up to your belt buckle 12 times a day for? The reason why was he needed to move and they didn't want him to leave the classroom. Okay. Well, there's nowhere to go. You're not going to go outside. He needed to bounce. He needed to walk around. Okay. So instead of letting him do that, they prevented him from leaving, which then he became aggressive and there was a behavior. There's a restraint. Then there's another restraint, another restraint. So how do you solve it? You build a program, as you know, from the BCBA perspective. What is your indication that you need to? Well, I need to walk. Okay, let's walk. Walk down the hallway, run around, go out. I would take kids to the gym, run around 12 times. Then we're done. Take a breath. All right, you're done? Good. Let's go back. Okay?
Yeah.
But you solve the problem not by keeping the kid in, but letting them, like Aaliyah at church. Okay, so she had vocalizations. Since she gets up, she walks to the back. She goes in the back where there's doors, which I know there are doors because I went to church so many times. Okay, and then you come back in.
Yeah.
Same thing with infants. You remember having infants. What do you tell the parents? You can't bring an infant to church? No, they cry. When they cry, mom or dad picks the kid up, walks around, bounces, walks around in the back, and then comes back in.
Yeah.
And that's how you do it. But you just don't say and shut the door and say, no, you can't do it. Or no, you can't leave the classroom, little kindergartner, because you need to bounce because you have all this energy and you don't know what to do with it. Their brain's not processing that. They just need to know they have to jump up and down. Okay. It just was a sad situation to see a little kid like that. And they got a bad reputation and they're like, never had a problem. You need to go out. Okay, let's go. You need to vocalize. Let's go in the back. So you have built in, you have 5 kids. Walk with Aaliyah, go in the back and come back in.
Yeah, now she's doing great. It's just that back then I was a young mom. Not that young, but I was being reprimanded for bringing my child. And we were sitting in the back because I was also worried about her seizures. I was like, just in case something were to happen, I can give her rescue med, but it'll be in the back and it won't disrupt the service. So I was already thinking this, but I think just being told basically for us to leave because we're disrupting mass, I'm like, this is actually the time that I need it the most. So
Well, you know this, and I've seen it, and I know you've seen it, and I know you've experienced it. Folks don't know how to work with someone with disabilities. They just don't, especially someone with autism who may vocalize different things or have some body movement and stuff like that. And that's okay. You don't know. Okay. So you try to educate people. I was in a grocery store recently and a guy who's working there, older adult with autism and loud, had a lot of body movement and stuff like that. And people were walking away from him. Okay. And they were afraid. And I walk up and he's like, hey, I want to give you a high five. And I'm watching people and they're like, oh my God. And I'm like, give me a high five. What's your name? My name's so-and-so. Give me another high five. I wasn't afraid because I worked with kids. So I know people can be afraid and they don't know. Then you educate them and you say, listen, this is what is, this is what it's not. This is what you can do. This is what you can't do. Okay. And you just introduce the disability to people who don't know it. It's not their fault. They just don't understand. It's when they make a preconceived notion and they don't like someone because of that, then that becomes a problem. But you give them an opportunity to understand it and learn it and say, this is what she does. It's cool. You know, we just do this when this happens. Okay. And then you explain it. But most of the time, people don't know. And it shouldn't have to be our obligation to explain it. But sometimes it's better to explain so people feel more comfortable in being in a situation with someone with a disability like that versus them being afraid of the person or being annoyed at the person. So that's how I've always approached it. But I had fun with the guy. And I'm like, where can I find eggs? And it helped him because he had a purpose then. The eggs are in aisle 5. I'm like, okay, is that way? It's that way. And his mom was there as the caregiver while he was working. And he's an older guy. He's probably about 40. And she was just laughing. She goes, no one talks to him like that. They just move away from him. I'm like, oh, he's cool. I like him. And now I see him all the time. He's like, Mr. Michael, I see you again. And I'm like, how you doing? He goes, do you need eggs? And I'm like, I don't need eggs. I need milk.
Where do I get them?
And he tells me where to go. So
I know you made his day, but you also made the mom's day too. And what you did also that's huge is that you taught everyone else around there. I was like, that's how I should have been responding.
Sure. You're mirroring how that interaction should be. Okay. Yeah. Some lady actually asked me, she goes, what's wrong with him? I said, there's nothing wrong with him. I think he's probably has autism. and he vocalizes loudly, but you don't have to be afraid of him. Just talk to him. He's cool. He's a really cool dude, and he has a name. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? So I see Roger all the time now,
Yeah.
and
That's so great.
now he helps me, and we have fun. And I see him at the Giant. It's down the street from my house. And I see him. I mean, he's probably about 45. And mom just laughs now because here comes Mr. Michael. And I'm like, God, everyone calls me Mr. Michael. Just call me Michael. So I can hear him hollering, Mr. Michael, you have the gray Jeep. It's not gray, it's blue.
You reminded me, I took my daughter to the trampoline park. It's in Gaithersburg. I took
Sky
her
Zone.
there. Sky Zone. Okay. Yeah. Well, I took her there, and my four other kids and my 14-year-old teenager was hanging out with his friends. So I couldn't ask him to help me with Aaliyah, but I also had to monitor my little ones. Aaliyah was just stuck on one part. She didn't want to move, but I'm keeping my eyes on her. She's still safe. She's not bothering anyone. But I am hearing the teenage girls talk about like, why is she acting weird? I know the
Mm,
word was weird, but they did say, what's wrong with her? Why is she doing
mm-hmm.
that? And that, as a parent, that hurts. And I'm
Yes.
gonna try to get emotional, but you reminded me when the older lady said that to you. I'm like, man, it's something that I guess I have to anticipate that not everyone in society will understand Aaliyah, but I'm just hopeful that they will be accepting of individuals like Aaliyah and just allow them to be part of the community and not be afraid.
Yes. I'll tell you a quick story. When I worked at the School for the Blind, I would bring my nephew for Uncle Michael's summer camp. Okay. And he would hang out with me at the office while I worked during ESY and stuff like that. Okay. So he was a little kid and he had no interactions with kids who were blind, visually impaired, or deaf, hard of hearing, or deafblind kids. But he met a lot of kids there and he didn't know. So he would just want to be cool friends with kids and run around and play with kids. So he built the capacity with this population, okay, that typical kids would never get. So shoot ahead 5 years. He's in school. They have a new student come in. Guess what? It was a kid that he used to hang out in the summertime at the School for the Blind, and he knew her. So she thought she wouldn't have any friends. And soon as she walked in, he's like, "Hey, it's Liam, huh? You remember me? I used to run up and down the steps with you." Yes, she had a friend. And he was able to help his friends there and say, wait a minute, she has a long cane. Okay. So you got to be careful when she's sweeping her cane that you don't trip or things like that. So he was telling them how to interact with her. So she had a friend. She had someone who was helping support her disability in a new school with typical kids.
Yeah.
But it all happened because he just like, hi, I'm Liam. How are you? He didn't say, oh, hi, I'm Liam. You're the blind kid. How are you different? He didn't know. He had no idea until he did. And then he realized, okay, she could do that. I can do that. Or I can't do that. And she can. You just learn. But in a situation like that, then you go and say, listen, yeah, she's a little different. This is why. And you educate people.
Yeah.
And if they want to be educated, they will. If they don't, they'll shut down and they won't. But you tried and you move on. Okay. But that's
Aw.
how I've always handled it. Especially like the Sky Zone, when he would see kids who were coming in who clearly had a disability, that's who he wanted to play with because he was so comfortable
I
around
love
kids.
Liam.
You know what I mean? Yeah, that's why he's a cool kid.
Yes,
He's a
he
cool kid.
is. Thank you for sharing that story because moms need to hear that there are, just like there are people that may judge our kids, there's definitely also great individuals like you and Liam that make sure that they feel included, that they're part of the community. So thank
Mhm.
you for being that great role model for Liam. Because
Sure,
then he's
sure,
going to be
absolutely.
another great role model for other people. So it
Yeah,
just,
he was really good at his school to step up and help support kids with disabilities because he knew it. And again, they were his friends. He wasn't like that's the person who's blind who's my friend. It's just no, that's my friend. Okay, and they stayed friends. They're still friends.
that's
Okay,
great.
just from running up and down. Now the president of the school at that point didn't like it because these two little kids were running up and down and they were falling and stuff like that. But you know what? They had fun and they built a friendship out of just a chance meeting in a school in the summertime and they stayed friends from that point forward.
Thank you. That's such a great story for you to share. Because I was like, oh no, I'm going to be sad thinking about that. And now you just made it better.
Yeah.
Well, Michael, talking about this previous story, if we can please go back to this previous story. Do you remember the one that they were restraining the student
Yes.
on? It sounded like he needed a one-to-one to kind of let him go instead of just
You
being.
think?
Yes. But which leads to my question, when will the school know that a one-to-one is actually needed?
Well, hopefully the data is supporting the one-to-one use. Okay. Schools are reluctant to provide a one-to-one, which that child did not have a one-to-one. Imagine if they did and they were able to work with him before he would never have had to be in a non-public, probably, which he was referred out to. But the data should support the child's need for a one-to-one, that need that additional support to help them with daily activities, whether it's to go for mobility purposes, to help them get from point A to point B, for behavior purposes, to help support them in that sense. Or the biggest thing is to help support them, keep them focused on their academic piece and keep focusing them back to learning, and instead of veering off when they get distracted. Nope, let's focus back. We got to finish this first before we go outside. Let's focus back. Hey, we need to finish 5 more questions before we get back. I'll help you. Okay. But the data should support the one-to-one usage. Schools are reluctant to make the determination without that data support that the student is, like that example that I gave. It was very clear that if they sat in a meeting and they realized and they were doing what they were really supposed to do, they would have realized a one-to-one probably could have solved this issue to keep that kid focused. Okay. Instead of having to restrain a kid who, again, came up to my belt buckle. Okay.
Oh,
So
poor baby.
it's important that you do it for the right reasons. Sometimes people say, well, we need a one-on-one because of a behavior situation. That's not going to prevent a behavior. Okay. To have someone who's one-to-one with you, to use that person as a shield to prevent a behavior, that's not the best use of a one-to-one. They need to be able to provide a service to the student to help support them academically, mobility wise, instructional wise, to help support and keep them focused on learning. That's what
Yeah.
the whole idea of a one-to-one is, and that's what they should be doing.
Yeah, I know there's a lot of families in the public school system that are requesting that. And it's just so hard for them to have that. So, when would you tell the family? I know that you definitely need the data to back everything up, but when you hear a story, be like, oh, yeah, that definitely sounds that they need a one-to-one.
Well, if you're a cook, which I know you are, you try to make a recipe 5 different ways. Okay, if you've tried 5 different ways and it's still not coming out, then that's probably when you need it. So you try everything else besides that. You try rearranging their seat. If it's a student with a visual impairment, you try enlarging work products and things like that. You try all these different things. You document it. If it's not working, then maybe you can trial a one-to-one support, okay, without actually putting it in the IEP to see if it's going to work. But sometimes it comes down to that. You try everything else, and then that may be the situation that you need to have to better support the student.
Thank you for that. I like that. I really like that example because families just need to ask, like, how many times do we have to change things? It's still not working. And we don't want it to get to what happened to that student with
Sure.
restraining. So,
But it goes back to my original, what we were talking about. Sometimes it's like, no, we're not going to do it right now because we don't have the data. So let's try this. Let's change their seat closer to the door. So if they have to get up and they need a break, we can come up with some type of signal that they can take a break, and the assistant teacher can then walk with them or whatever out the door. So they don't have to then bust out the door. Then it's a behavior. Then they're eloping. A lot of times the kids just need a walk. They say it's an elopement. It's not. I've read so many, they've eloped 5 times. Then you talk to the person. Yeah, they needed a break. You just designated it as an elopement. And now
yeah,
that kid has a red mark on their IEP says behavior, behavior,
yeah.
bad. That's not the case. So you try all these different things. Okay. And if they work, but sometimes it has, Floor, no, we're not going to do it right now. Let's try this first. Okay. But again, if I have a relationship with you, that no is not me slamming my hand on the table and saying, no, we're not doing it. It's let's try this first. I'm curious if we change his seat, maybe that will work.
And then we'll reconvene and talk about
And
it.
yes, yes.
We're not going to wait a year, though.
No, we're not going to wait a year.
I love how you put the reconvene part of it.
Mhm.
But it can also be said about the opposite. So my daughter, and I think the reason why I put this question in here is my daughter is so prompt dependent. She is so prompt dependent. She actually has a one-to-one more for her medical needs. If she shows signs like precursors that she's about to have a seizure, so she has more of a one-to-one due to those reasons. But even if she didn't have those reasons, I was also making the argument that she definitely needs a one-to-one on that because when I did a classroom observation and I'm like, where's her one-to-one? They're like, oh, well, it's in the classroom and she doesn't really have an assigned one-to-one because it's more for medical needs. I was like, are you kidding me? Aaliyah is not following direction. She cannot follow direction if there's not someone because she gets off task. And it can be for many reasons. But if she's gently guided, like, oh, and just even if you tap on the paper, she's like, oh, yeah, over here. But sometimes she'll
Hmm.
just be not focusing on anything but who the speaker is or what they're saying or following through. So she
Sure.
definitely needed that. So that's why I tell parents, please do classroom observation so you can actually see what's going on. Even though it was written on paper, they weren't following what the IEP said. And then we did more clarification on exactly what that one-to-one was. But then I went in again, but then they were over prompting. I was like, oh my goodness, there should be a hierarchy. There's a hierarchy for different prompt levels. But what I
Correct.
was seeing is everything was being done for Leah. And I'm like, no, definitely not that. So
Yeah.
it can also be used as, and when I was talking to my parent support group, was that sometimes when the parents also see the observation, it's like the child doesn't really need a one-to-one to that level, but a lot of it it's being used because it's nice to have that extra staff in the classroom instead of trying to fade them out.
Yes. Well, go back to one to one. That means attached to one kid, not over here in the other side of the room over there. Now, one to one sometimes peel off and may have to step in and help someone else, but they're still assigned to that one student. But I do agree with you. There are some instances where, when you have little kids, okay, and you're trying to get out of the house, but you're trying to get them to get dressed all by themselves, okay, and it's going to take an hour. So what do? You help them. Let's put dark pants on. Okay. That's sometimes. But when you get to the point where the one to one is actually doing the work, and I've seen that, then you have to stop that and say, you are here specifically to provide this support. If it takes them an hour to get from point A to point B, that's what happens. But you let them do it. Your job is to help them focus back to the task at hand, not to do it for them, okay? But to give them prompts. As you said, there's a hierarchy of prompts coming off the bus. Okay, Michael, there's 3 steps you have to come down. Let's do step one. Step one. Okay, what comes after one? You got to do step two, and so on and so forth. But if you just go up, grab the kid's hand, and bring them down the steps, you're not helping them. You're not teaching them anything. You're just doing it for them and supporting them. That's not what the one's there to do. Okay, so it can be detrimental and it can be really proactive and really needed to support. But without the observation, and the teacher should be stepping in and saying, nope, that's not how we're doing this. You're there to do this, not to do that. That
Yeah.
should be the teacher directing those staff.
Yes.
If you're going in as a one to one, I have always told staff before you even hit that classroom, you need to read that IEP, you need to read that BIP, and you need to be really familiar what you should be doing and what you shouldn't be doing. And if you have questions before you start doing it, you need to sit down and have it explained to you. So either the BA could come in and explain the BIP and say, these are why we do certain things, or the
Hmm.
special ed teacher saying, these are why we do certain things. Before you attach someone and just let them do what they do, they don't know. They have no idea. They don't know this kid. And you're putting them at a really disadvantage by just doing what they think they should be doing versus following the IEP. That's a
Yeah.
problem.
Yes, you said so many great things there. Thank you so much for explaining that. I think sometimes parents, they may not know what they don't know, so they need to hear more of you.
We got to do a workshop.
Oh my goodness, yes, I think that's a great idea, especially because for a person that has done your role, you're very student focused and parent friendly. And I really wish that they would be better relationships because we are just trying to go towards for our kids, right? I know whenever I speak to schools, like if they go onto this field, it's because they care about the kids. But I think sometimes being burnt out may play a huge factor why they may say or do things, or maybe being overworked, but that's still not an excuse. But I'm trying to understand more about why certain things. But I feel that if only admin knew that if they can bring the parent to be part of the team and really make them feel welcomed, these conversations can go and it can just look so differently
Well,
for parents.
you got to look at what's in the best interest of everything. Would you rather be running a school where there's drama and all kinds of crazy stuff going on every day? Or would you rather be running a program that's clearly effective, it's clearly efficient, and it's clearly there doing the things that we created it? When you build a school, when you start a school, what's the mission and vision of the school? Okay, that's the first thing. You got to always follow that. I have run into roadblocks running schools where, again, I told you everyone has a boss. So there was a boss above me, but they wanted it done this way. But I'm like, that's not kid focused. I'm
Yeah.
doing it this way. Now that put me at a detriment sometimes because then I was back in the
I know.
principal's office. I was in trouble because I didn't want to do it the way
That
they
was
wanted
me
to
as a
do it.
teacher too.
Yeah. But I always went back to what is best for kids. That's what I'm going to do and
Yeah.
do it the right way. If you do it the right way, then 9 times out of 10, you don't have to repeat the act. So if you do it the right way the first time, you don't have to go back and fix it and change it because you did it the right way. But if you slack and take the easy way, you're going to have to redo it again and you're going
Yeah.
to have a problem. So just do it the right way at first and just have integrity to stand up and say, this is not the right way to do it. This is the right way to do it. I've run into roadblocks before. You have to make a determination when you're starting out in this field what you're going to accept and what you're not going to accept. Sometimes I've had to say, okay, I have to give in and I have to do this. But for the most part, I have stuck with what I believe in. It's not put me in a good position sometimes because, again, everyone has a boss, but I knew it was the right thing for kids. And that's my first priority. If you're running a school, the first priority is always what is best for students overall, not what's
Yeah.
best for you or your career. It's what's best for students. If you stick to that, you'll be successful with some road bumps. If you don't, then you're just going to be like everybody else. And that's just a job. It was never a job for me. It was a
Mhm.
passion. It was a career. It was what I wanted to do because it was important work to do to help support you as a family with a student with disabilities because you have a lot of other things to do. My job was to help you, not to go against you. So that's how I have done my work over the years. It's been hard sometimes because people look at you like you're nuts sometimes and they're like, he's just being obstinate. No, it's not what's best for kids. This is what's best for kids. Okay. And that's what I'm going to do. So that's how I've moved my career. And that was the focus always on how I did it.
Yes, I feel like we really do need to do a workshop for parents for their kids.
Mhm.
But my last question for you is, can you please tell us about, you have something going on April 17th. Can you please tell us about that?
Yes, I am going to be doing a presentation. We just solidified it, and I'm going to get to it in my computer. It's a conversation I'm going to have at BISM, which is the Blinds Industries organization that works with individuals with visual impairment within the state of Maryland. And the conversation is going to be open for kids, for adults, for staff. And the structure of the presentation is from struggle to strength, finding yourself on the way forward. So I'm going to be talking about situations that may knock you off the horse and you have to get back up and keep riding, and things in life that could possibly prevent you from being successful, but you have to recognize them and still try to climb the mountain. So it's a conversation for folks who maybe have a disability, who they're struggling to move forward, or someone who's having something happen in life that kind of stop them in their tracks, and how do they get from this point to this point. And I use examples from my life and some of the students that I have met along the way to help get them to see that struggle can turn into strength. It's how you do it, how you focus that inner belief. So that it's going to be a fun day on April 17th at BISM, and we can get you some information and you can put it out on your network.
Yes.
So I'm excited.
Yes. Will this also be a virtual?
Yes,
Oh,
it'll be in person and as well as virtual. Okay. You'll have an
be-
option to go on Zoom. I think they'll do Zoom or be in person.
will it also be recorded so people can have it replay on demand type of thing?
I think so. I do think so. I'm not 100%, but I do believe that's how they will do it. So it's interesting. I was just down at BISM and I met someone in my network and they asked me to come down. And while I'm walking around, I started seeing students that I used to have at the School for the
Oh,
Blind, okay, who are now adults working within the organization. And it was great. One of the kids I worked with is now a grown man who is part of their IT team, okay,
love
who's a
that.
blind individual. Perfect example of struggle to strength. and being successful. It's the gap in the game. Do you live in the gap where things are always a problem and you can't achieve? Or do you live in the gain and look at all those small gains that you've made in your life to say, you know what? This is really cool. You can do this. So I don't live in the gap anymore. I did. I live in the gain. So I look at all things with the positive thing, a lens, and say, you know what? It's not what I exactly wanted, but it's pretty cool. Okay. It's pretty cool to have it to do this. So that's what the conversation is going to be about. And I'm excited to do it. So, yeah.
That's so beautiful. When you were speaking, you made me think about Welcome to Holland. We can talk about actually, have you heard that poem?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I wasn't sure. Maybe this will be our part 3 talk because that what you just shared is so beautiful. It may not be what we thought, but it's beautiful. I'm so happy that you were able to see when they were students and then their future current self. So that is so great that you were able to see that. And I'm so happy.
Well, I met one student who was like me in school and always was in the principal's office. And I was telling a story to some of the staff. I was like, Mr. Michael, no one knew that about me. I'm like, yeah, but it's fun now. Yeah, but I got in trouble then. I'm like, you got in a little bit of trouble. Okay. But actually, I'm going to use that as an example in my conversation. It was fun to see folks who, from the outside, you would say, man, are they ever going to be successful? And then me as practitioner, yes, they are going to be successful because we're going to give them the tools to be successful. And now to see them in their success, doing just typically like you and I, working just a job that they're getting paid for, that they're part of the community, they pay taxes. Right. They're just accepted now just as a community person versus someone who has autism or versus someone who has a visual impairment. They're just a person working in a job. And it was great to see the transition, the journey to strength, that they're using their abilities, okay,
to help others.
Their special abilities. It's a disability or it's an ability. You can look at it both ways to be successful. So that's how I always looked at kids when they said kids with disabilities. No, kids with special abilities, not disabilities.
Like take the dis out of the disability and it'll be ability.
That's their strength. Okay, that's their strength.
Yes.
That's how I looked at working with kids throughout these years, that they're human beings and anyone could achieve if given the opportunities for success. Success is different. It could be this, it could be this, or it could be this. Doesn't matter. It depends on the person, but success is still success.
Yeah, I definitely see that.
Yep.
So I will definitely be watching you on, well, I'm going to try to go there in person. April 17th.
It'll be pretty cool. So it'll be at BISM on April 17th from 10 to 12. It's going to be a fun time.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Michael, for coming today and sharing all of your insights. Thank you so much. This has been so great for families. Again, I know I said it in the last episode, how I really wished I would have met you when I was first starting off, but I'm so glad that the families are listening to you now in their journey. So it's so great for them to have access to you. Thank you.
I'm happy to do it. And again, projects that we can work on in the future, we can build space where kids can be successful. So I'm looking forward to all that and then working together in other things, you and I and Sean.
Yes. Thank you so much. We'll share more about the projects later on.
Yes.
So just
can't wait.
Stay tuned.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay.
Bye.
See you later.
That right there, that's the type of conversation parents don't usually get access to. Now, here's what most people skip, and I don't want you to. So what is the one thing that you heard today that you're actually going to use? What are you going to ask differently in your next IEP meeting? Write it down and use it. Because listening without action, it changes nothing. So please, if this episode helped you, follow and subscribe, share it with another parent. I'm sure you know someone that really needs this, and leave a comment. I read them and they shape what I create next. And if you're ready to go deeper, head on to www.startingwithiep.com. You'll find our courses, workbooks, and tools to help you advocate with clarity and confidence. And one more thing, if you learned something the hard way, if you have a story that could help another family, please go to our website and submit your story, because your experience might be exactly what another parent needs to hear right now. I'll see you in the next episode. Bye.